Chapter 2. Getting Lost. As she approached the playground in the park, Sally recognized the two girls on the swings. They were a year older than Sally and were in Alex's third-grade class last year at school. Sally wanted to go swing with them and headed in that direction. The smart part of Sally threw out a really good point. If they tell Alex they saw you, you might get found out before you find the crazy cat lady. Sally quickly ducked behind a bush and peeked to see if the girls had spotted her. Nope, her plan was still intact. She would go straight to the school without stopping to swing with the girls. But now the big question was, which way should she get to school? Sally had never, ever walked to school by herself before. She was always with Alex and Mom and Rinny, and they never went through the park. Mom always took them on the sidewalk because she pushed Rinny in her fuchsia transport chair. Rinny would have much rather walked in her wobbly little walk, but Mom always pushed her for the sake of getting to school on time. Sally laughed at the memory of how Rinny always complained about having to ride in her chair. "I no want to. I want to walk. I big girl, Mommy." Mom would try to rationalize with Rinny, explaining that they needed to hurry to get to school. But Sally's baby sister knew what she wanted and had no trouble verbalizing it. As Sally thought about Rinny, a weird, weepy feeling rose from her throat and into her nose. Before any tears could come out her eyes, Sally stomped her foot and changed her thoughts. She remembered how her best friend Tia would sometimes join them on the way to school. The two second-graders would lag behind, gathering leaves and petals from people's yards for their unique blend of elementary school path potpourri. Sally's potpourri mix never smelled like the stuff Mom had in a bowl on the entry table. Sally's was much more woody and fresh. Sally spotted a big palm frond under the palm tree off to her right. Enticed by its green fan and long handle, she emerged from the bushes and headed straight toward it, making sure the girls on the swing weren't looking her way. She picked it up, and her imagination went wild. The next hour or so was spent meandering through the park, pretending she was the Queen of Egypt and was being fanned by her royal subjects. They weren't very good at fanning and kept hitting Sally in the ears, tangling her long brown hair in the palm frond. Then she made up 2 or 3 great games to play with the palm frond in the picnic table area. She put it between 2 benches and jumped over it, balanced it on her hand while standing on a table, and, standing on tiptoe, tried to invite the local birds to nest in it. None of the birds were too terribly interested. While chasing one of the little birds out to the sidewalk, Sally looked up and was a bit confused by her surroundings. There was a street in front of her with a sign that said, "Wright Brothers Way." She didn't recognize the name. Her school was on Earhart Road. She knew that because they had studied Amelia Earhart, America's most famous lady pilot, at school last year. Sally didn't recognize any of the houses or cars or sounds around her. Just as she was pausing to figure out a plan, she spotted an orange cat trotting toward a driveway. Sally's feline frenzy took over. She dropped the palm frond and flew down Wright Brothers Way to make a new friend. The orange furry cat plopped into the pavement in a lazy roll and started to clean itself. Sally couldn't resist laying on her belly a few inches from the cat's face and talking feline to it. Soon enough, the two were best friends. Orangey, the name that Sally gave the cat, let Sally pet her and tickle her ears and expound on her great and mighty cat attributes. Orangey seemed to like Sally's high-pitched squeals of delight and twitched her ears often in response. Immediately, Sally deemed Orangey her BFF, best feline forever, and Orangey winked approvingly. Sally and Orangey reveled so long in each other's company that Sally didn't notice the sun dropping low. Suddenly, there was a shrill whistle from behind Orangey's house, and Orangey sprung up and trotted off, not even bothering to look back and say goodbye. Sally was about to run after the cat, but when she stood up and looked around, she gasped. Oh no! She realized something terrible. Not only was it getting dark, but Sally was lost. Panic attacked her, and Sally could hardly breathe. She started running frantically down the sidewalk. It seemed like the best thing to do. At At least the running helped her breathe again and left panic blinking in the dust behind her. Sally didn't really know how far she had run, but she was feeling better now. The pounding of her boots against the pavement reminded Sally of her favorite mantra, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. The memory of her most recent time out crammed itself into her face, and jealousy gripped Sally's heart so tight she had to go with it for fear her heart would stop beating. Those stupid sisters, it sang. They go to therapy and get attention and earn lollipops and have fun, while you run through the streets lost. Those stupid special needs sisters. It's not fair. Stupid special needs sisters, Sally muttered under her breath. She instantly felt guilty. She wasn't allowed to say the S word. Stupid. Spisters, she spit out. Ah, that felt better. She wasn't actually saying the forbidden S word, but the meaning was all there. Spisters, spisters, spisters. The thump of her Batman boots on the ground as she ran pounded the word into her heart. Spisters. That's what Sally had. Stupid, special needs sisters that never let her have any attention. And then Sally had a great idea. On this walkabout adventure, Sally was not going to have any spisters. She was going to be an only child, with 16 cats and a rabbit. The sky in Sally's I'm Right world broke open and shone a sparkly blue, despite the setting sun in the natural sky. Her heart inflated like a mylar balloon, and she felt fabulous. Yes, that was it. Sally was now an only child. As Sally walked along Wright Brothers Way, she made up songs about being an only child. She even threw in some of her best whistling. Sally was an excellent whistler. This made her heart feel light and free. She let her left hand dance across a short white fence that bordered a backyard at the corner of the upcoming intersection. She liked how the wrought iron felt under her fingers. The fence arced gracefully with the curve of the sidewalk and brought her to Red Baron Road, another street she didn't recognize. When the fence stopped at the driveway, she noticed a matching white mailbox. Its door was open, and there was a printed flyer on the ground below it. Sally remembered that Mom always says, we should leave a place better than we found it. So Sally went over and picked up the printed flyer off the ground. It was a discount coupon for a pizza place. Just then, Sally's tummy grumbled with hunger, and she quickly shoved the flyer back into the mailbox. She didn't like being reminded that she was hungry, because then she'd have to think about the mac and cheese her family was eating right now, and she wasn't going to think about that. That's when Sally noticed there were lots of letters inside the mailbox. These people must not have any kids to get their mail, she thought. But then she realized it felt more like a riddle to be solved. Why would there be so much mail in the mailbox? Where were the people who lived in the house? What was the story here? It felt important to know for some reason. She shut the mailbox door firmly and pushed the red flag down all the way so the mailman wouldn't take the mail away. Just then, a light blinked on over the garage door and startled Sally. She jumped involuntarily and thought she heard something rustle in the bushes behind her. She froze, partly in fear and partly to listen for who turned on the light. Nothing. She didn't hear anything or see anyone moving inside, and she was too scared to turn around to see if there was a monster creeping up on her from behind. She focused her thoughts on the light. How could the light go on without anyone there? Then she remembered that she had her best stuffed kitty, Rafa, in her bag. He was excellent at keeping away monsters. She carefully pulled him out of the ballet bag and hugged him so he could look over her shoulder behind them. In her imagination, he let out a mighty roar, and the monster dissolved into thin air. She breathed a sigh of relief and turned to look behind her where it had been. Across the street, to her left, there was a clump of mini Christmas trees around a sign that said, God's Place. Beyond the trees sat a bright, happy building with a big lowercase T on the top. Sally knew that meant this building was a church, because Mom, Alex, Rennie, and she had driven to Auntie's church once to drop off their extra toys for some poor people. But at Auntie's church the T was painted on the window, not sitting on top of the roof. Sally remembered that Auntie went to church often and always seemed to have a lot of fun there. Sally had wanted to go with Auntie, but Daddy said no. He explained that their family, Daddy, Mom, Alex, Sally, and Rennie, didn't go to church. It had something to do with beliefs and choices and stuff like that Sally didn't quite understand. When you are older, you can make your own choice, Daddy had told her. Well, wasn't she older now? She was certainly old enough to go on a walkabout all by herself. So she was obviously old enough to go to church, she decided. Adjusting the ballet bag to her other shoulder and perching Rafa inside it so he could see out, Sally stood up nice and tall like they tell you to do in ballet class. She took a deep breath and carefully crossed the street. There were lots of cars turning into the parking lot and several small groups of people greeting each other and talking. Sally felt scared and excited all at the same time. She noticed most of the people were heading in the same direction, toward double doors on the side of the building. "What do you think, Rafa? Should we go in?" Sally whispered. Rafa's whiskers twitched and he looked happy. Sally took that as a yes. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sally started walking. With each step, her curiosity grew bigger and bigger, and by the time she reached the double doors, she was giddy with excitement.